Thank you, Bob. I appreciate your kind introduction and also your leadership of the Urban Health Institute, which does so much here at Hopkins and here in Baltimore to make progress on these important issues. And good morning to everyone. Welcome to Johns Hopkins. I'm grateful for all the good and meaningful work that we've done together and that we will do together today with your help. So I'm grateful to all of you for being here, and especially grateful to Bob and the Urban Health Institute and the staff and all of our partners for today's symposium. Absolutely thrilled by the turnout, and as Bob said, this is a critically important conversation for us to be having in the United States, here in Baltimore, and here at Johns Hopkins. I always look forward to these annual symposia on the social determinants of health. We've, over the last few years, as Bob said, this is the fifth of these symposia. We've explored a number of critically important topics and always come out of these days energized and full of ideas to carry forward into action, both here at the university and in the community. In recent years, we focused on trauma and issues of trauma in the community and trauma-informed care. The year before, on the costs and consequences and alternatives to incarceration. So as you can see, as many of you know from having been here in past years, these are truly important and impactful conversations. That said, I'm especially pleased to be here today to welcome you to this year's conference on this theme, which, as Bob said, is something that I've spent my entire professional life thinking about and writing about, that is structural and institutional racism. As Bob said, I've written a number of books on this topic. I think my publishers would want me to mention them here, but I'm not going to do that. But it is, as Bob said, something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and writing about, and I think it's critically important that as a community, both inside the university and between across the entire community of Baltimore, we spend time on this. There's really no more urgent issue that the United States and that cities like Baltimore face today than structural and institutional racism. The effects often in full view, but even more often and more confoundingly and frustratingly hidden from view. The effects of racial disparities, and in particular, what has seized my attention in the last few years as I've been thinking about this is the impact of things that on their face that don't seem to be racially biased but systematically produce racially imbalanced outcomes. And I know that you, as part of your work today, will spend a lot of time thinking through some of these questions and issues and unpacking some of these processes. In a country founded on equality, this can be hard to acknowledge. It's not an easy thing for us often to say or to understand. And further complicating such recognition and comprehension is how stubbornly persistent racial inequality and segregation have proven to be, even in the last generation, when we feel as though we've made, in a lot of ways, so much progress. But it does exist. Racism does exist. Segregation does exist, as tragically underscored just almost exactly a year ago by the death of Freddie Gray, by the ensuing response that has been commemorated quite vividly and quite movingly in the last few days. I want to raise a related question today, and one that our local newspaper, the Baltimore Sun, as you've probably seen, has been putting in the last few weeks to a cross-section of Baltimoreans. And the question is, what does Freddie Gray mean to you? It's a great question. It's an important question, and it's elicited and highlighted some of the depth of feeling, some of the impact of the last year in our community, and some of the differences of opinion, frankly, and perspectives that are important for us to have in view as we enter into a day-long discussion on these questions. The answers that the Sun captured on video, and if you haven't seen them, I'd urge you to go take a look at some of them. The answers are truly thought-provoking. and in some cases quite moving. Consider, for example, the juxtaposed responses of one middle-aged white woman and one middle-aged African-American man. While the situation for the woman represented, quote, an awakening, the gentleman said it was more like a bad rerun, explaining none of this is new to us. We see this happening every day. Other respondents deliver powerful, even poetic paradoxes. Freddie Gray means justice and sadness, said one respondent. Another said he represents the hurts and hopes of our city. In these short, compact responses, you see spread out the entire array of challenges, of aspirations, of feelings, of understandings, of misunderstandings on this issue, and it's to those things that we need to turn urgent attention. My colleague, my boss, the president of the university, Ron Daniels, also took part and said that Freddie Gray to him represented an urgent call to action. I have no doubt that your individual answers, the answers represented in this room to that question, are just as varied and diverse and deep and profound and deeply felt as the answers that you can see on those videos. But just as I'm sure of our differences, I'm also certain of our similarity of purpose. I have every confidence that we in this room, those of you who are watching us online, colleagues and friends around the university and around the city, are unified in our commitment to the city, to our home here in Baltimore, to making Baltimore a more equitable place for all. We wouldn't be here otherwise, and I know you wouldn't be here otherwise. To build the more just, healthy, and equitable city that we all want and need and deserve, we have to address the questions that Bob outlined up front that I know that you will be confronting over the course of the day, and seek to understand and to begin to remedy, take concrete steps to remedy the persistent disadvantages and disparities that plague our community. I'm very happy that this conversation is happening here today at Johns Hopkins, and I know this is a conversation that is not restricted to this one time or place, but I'm very happy that Hopkins is able to provide a home for a day, a forum for a day to have this conversation. We at the university, of course, approach this day, this conversation, this set of issues with a large measure of quite warranted humility. Our heritage and history are quite complicated. The university was founded by and bears the name of a Quaker abolitionist, and was founded after the Civil War on a foundation of a commitment to openness and to equality. But as you all know, as we know very well inside the university, we have not always been what we aspire to be in terms of racial justice and equality, both inside our own, at home, inside the institution, inside the university, and in our connection with our neighborhood, our surrounding community. To become a more diverse and inclusive institution and to achieve our own ideals, to live up to the ideals that our founder, both our founder, our namesake, Mr. Hopkins, and our founding president, Daniel Coit Gilman, set for ourselves. We have to look inward and do better for ourselves. And as you may know, I don't want to dwell on too much of this, but I will say a word or two about some important initiatives that we've undertaken over this last year that will continue into the coming years, including an initiative on diversifying our faculty, initiatives to address issues of climate and disparities and felt disparities on our own campus. So we're turning our attention inward to think about our own challenges and what we can do at home, across the university, here in East Baltimore, at the Homewood campus, across town, everywhere inside the university, to make our university more hospitable, more open, more equitable, and more diverse. But like every house, our house, Johns Hopkins, exists in a neighborhood. And we are a far-flung institution. We have campuses in China and Italy and Washington, D.C., but our neighborhood is Baltimore. And we take very seriously our responsibility to our neighbors. Therefore, again, that's why I'm delighted that we're here today at Johns Hopkins convening this conversation. But we want and we need to be a part of this critical conversation on racism and racial disparities in Baltimore. And there we've also launched a number of initiatives that I just want to mention very quickly. As a, not to trumpet a set of accomplishments, but just to talk about the things that I think we've identified that need to be addressed, that we as an institution can take a small part in nudging forward. We are part of a large initiative called Be Local. Began with something called Hopkins Local. This is a pledge by 25 local companies, including Johns Hopkins, both the university and the health system, to build, hire, invest, and buy locally. And the commitment surrounding Be Local includes at least $69 million over the next 5 years that will be directed to the local economy through this initiative. And we're thrilled with the partnership that we've been able to put together across many of the major employers and institutions of our city over the last few months to get this launched and off the ground, and I hope it will bear fruit. Together with IBM, Hopkins has pledged to support 2 technology-focused, STEM-focused high schools that will open next fall to support young people in the city and cultivate the skills that our city needs to grow. We've also recently restructured and relaunched our Baltimore Scholars Program. This is a commitment that any young person from a Baltimore City public high school who is admitted to Hopkins as an undergraduate, whose family earns less than $80,000 a year, will be able to attend Hopkins, all expenses paid, tuition, room, board, the whole shebang. And even students from Baltimore City public high schools in the next income band up to $150,000 will receive not just tuition but substantial financial assistance to make it possible for graduates of Baltimore City public high schools to have the opportunity to come to Hopkins, to be part of our community, to learn and to be part of the university. So we're doing a number of things to try and connect more fully, more completely, more thoroughly, and more intimately with our neighborhood. But there's a lot more to be done, and I hope that today will be one of the next steps in that conversation and that connection. As my colleague President Daniels has so often noted, and as we firmly believe, the future of Baltimore and the future of Johns Hopkins are intricately intertwined. We are not just in Baltimore, we are of Baltimore, and we are working very hard to make that connection and that commitment come to fruition, and I hope today will be part of that endeavor. So let's use this symposium, let's use this day. I, of course, have to, as I told Dr. Blum, introduce and dash, which is pretty much the job description of a provost. But I hope that we, meaning you, are able to use the day and use the symposium to make clear and visible commitments to the kinds of issues that we're facing, to the need to reduce structural and institutional racism. I hope you'll take Bob's admonition very seriously. This is, I've learned in a few years here at Hopkins that it's really wise to take Bob's admonitions seriously, but to think concretely, think not just about the fascinating discussions that I know you'll have, but to think about what you can take away, each of you, each of us individually out of this room at the end of the day, what commitments we can take away to make a difference in our own homes, in our own neighborhood, here at Hopkins, around the city, and in your own communities and organizations. So again, welcome to the university, welcome to Johns Hopkins. Thank you for being here. Thank you for committing so much of your time to this important conversation. I wish you a very productive day, and let's get to work. Bob?